Hey guys, it's Miss B and Libby here. We're here to read to you some more Charlotte's Web. I'm going to try to read chapter 5 and 6. We'll see the length, but I'm going to try to do both as long as it's not too long, okay? So let's talk about what happened in the last chapter. In chapter 4, Wilbur was feeling a little bit lonely. He just really wanted a friend, and Fern hadn't come by yet that day, and he was looking for friends, you know, with the rat and sheep and really anybody in the barn. And at the very end of the chapter, he heard somebody, and they said to him that they'll be his friend and they'll see him in the morning. So we're gonna hopefully find out who that is. All right, chapter 5. Charlotte. The night seemed long. Wilbur's stomach was empty, and his mind was full. And when your stomach is empty and your mind is full, it's always hard to sleep. I agree with him. A dozen times during the night, Wilbur woke, and he stared into blackness, listening to sounds, trying to figure out what time it was. A barn is never perfectly quiet. Even at midnight, there's usually something stirring in the night. The first time he awoke, he heard Templeton gnawing a hole in the grain bin. Templeton's teeth scraped loudly against the wood, and it made quite a racket. That crazy rat, thought Wilbur. Why does he have to stay up all night grinding his clashers and destroying people's property? What do you think grinding his clashers means? If you thought like maybe something with his teeth, like chewing loudly, you're right. Why can't he go to sleep like any decent animal? The second time Wilbur woke, he heard the goose turning in her nests and chuckling to herself. Oh, what time is it? Wilbur asked the goose. Probably about 11:30, said the goose. Why aren't you asleep, Wilbur? Too many things on my mind, said Wilbur. Raise your hand if you've ever had trouble sleeping because you have a lot of stuff thinking in your brain. Yeah. Well, said the goose, that's not my trouble. I have nothing at all on my mind, but I've too many things under my behind. Have you ever tried to sleep while sitting on 8 eggs? No, replied Wilbur. I suppose that is uncomfortable. How long does it take a goose egg to hatch? Approximately 30 days, answered the goose, but I cheat a little. On warm afternoons, I just pull a little straw over the eggs and I go out for a walk. Wilbur yawned and he went back to sleep. In his dreams, he heard again the voice saying, I'll be a friend to you. Go to sleep and you'll see me in the morning. About half an hour before dawn, Wilbur awoke and he listened. The barn was still dark. The sheep lay motionless. Even the goose was quiet. Overhead, on the main floor, nothing stirred. The cows were resting. The horses dozed. Templeton had quit work and he'd gone off somewhere to run an errand. The only sound was a slight scraping noise from the rooftop, where the weather vane swung back and forth. If you don't know what a weather vane is, I want you to think about like a picture that you might have seen of a barn in a book or like on a movie, and you might see this thing up at the top, and that's a weather vane. It might be like made of metal, and you might see it like blowing in the wind. So he could hear that swinging back and forth. Wilbur loved the barn when it was like this, calm, quiet, just waiting for the light. Day is almost here, he thought. Through a small window, a faint gleam appeared. One by one, the stars went out. Wilbur could see that the goose were a few feet away. The goose sat with her head tucked under a wing. Then he could see the sheep and the lambs. The sky lightened. Oh, beautiful day, it is here at last. Today I will find my friend. Wilbur looked everywhere. He searched his pen thoroughly. He examined the window ledge. He stared up at the ceiling. He saw nothing new. Finally, he decided he'd have to speak up. He hated to break this lovely stillness of dawn by using his voice, but he just couldn't think of any other way to locate the mysterious new friend who was nowhere to be seen. So Wilbur cleared his throat. Attention, please, he said in a loud, firm voice. Will the party who addressed me at bedtime last night kindly make himself or herself known by giving an appropriate sign or signal? So I want you to tell me what you think Wilbur's meaning right now. Will the party who addressed me at bedtime last night kindly make himself or herself known by giving an appropriate sign or signal? So basically he's meaning like, will that animal that spoke to me last night show themselves? Wilbur paused and he listened. All the other animals lifted their heads and just stared at him. Wilbur blushed, but he was determined to get in touch with this unknown friend. Attention, please, he said. I will repeat the message. Will the party that addressed me at bedtime speak up? Please tell me who you are if you're my friend. The sheep looked at each other in disgust. Stop your nonsense, Wilbur, said the oldest sheep. If you have a new friend here, you're probably disturbing his rest. And the quickest way to spoil a friendship is to wake somebody up in the morning before they're ready. How can you be so sure your friend is an early riser? Oh, I beg everyone's pardon, whispered Wilbur. I didn't mean to be objectionable. That means he didn't mean to, upset anybody. He lay down in the manure facing the door. He didn't know it, but his friend was actually very near. And the old sheep was right. The friend was still asleep. Soon, Lurvy appeared with slops for breakfast. Wilbur rushed out, ate everything in a hurry. And the sheep moved off down the lane, and the gander waddled along behind them, pulling grass. And then, just as Wilbur was settling down for his morning nap, he heard again the thin voice that had addressed him the night before. Salutations, said the voice. Wilbur jumped to his feet. What? He cried. Salutations, repeated the voice. What are they and where are you? Screamed Wilbur. Please, tell me where you are and what are salutations. I want you to think, what do you think salutations are? Okay, the friend's going to tell us. Salutations are greetings, said the voice. When I say salutations, it's just my fancy way of saying hello or good morning. Actually, it's a silly expression, and I'm surprised that I used it at all. As for my whereabouts, that's easy. Look up here in the corner of the doorway. Here I am. Look, I'm waving. And at last, Wilbur saw the creature that had spoken to him in such a kind way. Can you spot the creature? Stretched across the upper part of the doorway was a big spider web, and hanging from the top of the web, head down, was a large gray spider. She was about the size of a gumdrop, and she had 8 legs, and she was waving one of them at Wilbur in a friendly greeting. See me now? She asked. Oh, yes, indeed, said Wilbur. How are you? Good morning, salutations. Very pleased to meet you. What is your name, please? May I have your name? My name, said the spider, is Charlotte. Charlotte what? Said Wilbur eagerly. Charlotte A. Cavatica, but just call me Charlotte. Oh, I think you're beautiful, said Wilbur. Well, I am pretty, replied Charlotte. There's no denying that, Libby. Thank you. Can you lay down? Okay, sit down. Okay, lay down. She's silly. Lay down. Okay, lay down. I am pretty, said Charlotte. There's no denying that. Almost all spiders are rather nice looking. I'm not as flashy as some, but I'll do. I do wish I could see you, Wilbur, as clearly as you can see me. Well, why can't you? Said the pig. I'm right here. Yes, but I am nearsighted, replied Charlotte. I've always been dreadfully nearsighted. It's good in some ways, but not so good in others. Watch me wrap up this fly. A fly that had been crawling along Wilbur's pin had flown up and blundered into the lower part of Charlotte's web, and it was tangled in its sticky thread. The fly was beating its wings furiously, trying to break loose and free itself. First, she said, I dive at him. She plunged headfirst toward the fly. As she dropped, a tiny silken thread unwound from her rear end. Next, I wrap him up. She grabbed the fly, threw a few jets of silk around it, and she rolled it over and over, wrapping it so it couldn't move. Wilbur watched. He watched in horror. He could hardly believe what he was seeing, and although he hated flies, he kind of felt sorry for that one. "There," said Charlotte. "Now I knock him out so he'll be more comfortable." She bit the fly. "He can't feel a thing now," she remarked. "He'll make a perfect breakfast for me." "Ew, you mean you eat flies?" gasped Wilbur. "Oh, certainly. Flies, bugs, grasshoppers, choice beetles, moths, butterflies, tasty cockroaches, gnats, daddy longlegs, midges, centipedes, mosquitoes, crickets, anything that is careless enough to get caught in my web. I have to live, don't I?" "Oh, well, yeah, of course," said Wilbur. "I mean, do they taste good?" "Oh, delicious, of course. I don't really eat them. I just drink their blood." "I drink their blood, of course. I love blood," said Charlotte, and her pleasant, thin voice grew even thinner and more pleasant. "Ooh, don't say that," groaned Wilbur. "Please don't say that." "Well, why not? It's true, and I have to say what's true. I'm not entirely happy about my diet of flies and bugs, but it's the way that I'm made. A spider has to pick up a living some way or another, and I happen to be a trapper. I just naturally build a web, and I trap flies and other insects. My mother was a trapper before me. Her mother was a trapper before her. All of our family have been trappers. Way back for thousands and thousands of years, we spiders have been laying for flies and bugs." "It's a miserable inheritance," said Wilbur gloomily. He was sad because his new friend was bloodthirsty. "Oh, yes," agreed Charlotte, "but I can't help it. I don't know how the first spider in the early days of the world happened to think up this fancy idea of spinning a web, but she did, and it was clever of her too. And since then, all of us spiders have had to work the same trick. It's not a bad pitch on the whole." "It's cruel," replied Wilbur, who did not intend to be argued out of position. "Well, you can't talk," said Charlotte. "You have your meals brought to you in a pail. Nobody feeds me. I have to get my own living. I live by my wits. I have to be sharp and clever, or I'll go hungry. I have to think things out, catch what I can, take what comes. And it just so happens, my friend, that what comes is flies and insects and bugs. And furthermore," said Charlotte, shaking one of her legs, "do you realize that if I didn't catch bugs and eat them, bugs would increase and multiply and get so numerous that they'd destroy the earth, wipe everything out?" So Charlotte is saying that she's doing the world a favor by eating some of the bugs and flies so we don't have too many of them in the world. "Really?" said Wilbur. "Well, I wouldn't want that to happen. Perhaps your web is a good thing after all." The goose had been listening to this conversation and chuckling to herself. There are a lot of things Wilbur doesn't know about life, she thought. He's really a very little innocent pig. He doesn't even know what's going to happen to him around Christmas time. He has no idea that Mr. Zuckerman and Lurvy are plotting to kill him. And the goose raised herself a bit, poked her eggs a little further under her so that they would receive the full heat from her warm body and soft feathers. Charlotte stood quietly over the fly, preparing to eat it. Wilbur lay down and closed his eyes. He was tired from his wakeful night and from the excitement of meeting someone for the first time. A breeze brought him the smell of clover, the sweet-smelling world beyond his fence. Well, he thought, I've got a new friend, all right. But what a gamble friendship is. Charlotte is fierce, brutal, scheming, bloodthirsty. Everything I don't like. How can I learn to like her even though she is pretty and, of course, clever? Wilbur was merely suffering the doubts and fears that often go with finding a new friend. In good time, he was to discover that he was mistaken about Charlotte. Underneath her rather bold and cruel, which means mean, exterior, she had a very kind heart, and she was to prove loyal and true to the very end. So loyal and true. I want you to think about what that could mean in a friend. Think of what it means if a friend is loyal and true to you. So if a friend is loyal to you, that means that they'll be by your side no matter what. They'll stick through thick and thin with you. And if they're true to you, that means that they're being honest to you and they're going to be with you no matter what. Okay, so I ended up reading just one chapter because that one was kind of lengthy. I think from here on out I'll probably end up just reading one because it always seems to take a little bit longer than I think. So that was a pretty jam-packed chapter. A lot happened. We met a pretty important character. And I think she's really important because her name's Charlotte and the book is titled Charlotte's Web. So I want you to think about some characteristics that Charlotte has. She seems bold. She's beautiful. I want you to think of a couple more on your own, okay? That's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed that chapter. And Libby and I say goodbye.